Now, to talk more on this issue, we have with us Professor Kim Hyun-wook from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. It's good to have you back on the show.
Thank you very much.
Let's start with the details of the increase to Seoul's contribution to the cost of having U.S. troops here in South Korea. Now, the South Korea's contribution has gone up from $850 million to $920 million, an increase of 8.2%. Now, this deal, though, only lasts for 1 year, and therefore further negotiations are expected. Now, this is not as much as perhaps Trump might have originally wanted. He talked about having double the South Korea's cost-sharing burden, but it's still an increase. So, is this a win for Trump or just sort of a compromise?
I think this is a very big raise from the South Korean perspective. You said that it has been $850 million, but now we have to pay for $920 million. And Trump said that it was $500 million that South Korea was paying, and South Korea decided to pay more of $500 million more, which means that the cost that South Korea was paying has been doubled up by making several phone calls. That's only what he did. He was kind of showing off in the United States about what he has done.
That was the quote he made, but obviously, you know, the numbers we have is not double.
Yeah, that's not the right number. I don't think every time Trump talks about the numbers, he does not know exact numbers. Maybe that's what happened this time again, but or he just wanted to make brag of what he has done, making some fake numbers to his, people in the United States. But the thing we have to take note of is the duration of this deal. So 1 year deal. It used to be a 5-year deal, but this time it's a 1 year deal. Maybe this year the U.S. has to negotiate with Japan and Germany again. So I think, the intention of the United States is to treat all the allies in the same pattern and same standard. The standards, unilateral standards, which I think would be more beneficial to the United States. So maybe we have to, sometime this year, have to negotiate again with the United States with the different, standard, with a different amount, and with a different, duration. So I think this time, the deal this year, I think, would be much tougher than last year.
Even reaching this deal took 10 rounds of negotiations over basically what was a year. It missed the original deadline of when this deal was ending and had to come into the current year, even though we were meant to be paying for it. So this took a long time. It was hard work, but now it's only a year. We have to start this process all over again now, don't we?
Yes, I think so. Maybe President Trump at least wants to raise more than the amount that he has raised this year, more than maybe 7%, 8%. So it will be a long game maybe. But I think there should be much more complicated negotiations. As I have said, we have to think about possible elongation and extension of what we have agreed, which is 1 year deal, but we might want to extend it into 2 years, which I don't think is realistic at all. But South Korea might have to think about, making the deal into a 3-year deal or 5-year deal again, which is now 1 year deal agreement. But U.S., I'm not sure if they would accept this kind of offer by South Korea. But I think this year, the deal will be pretty much tougher than last year's deal, I think.
Let's take a look at South Korea's reaction, because they reached this deal in a very difficult circumstances, but then literally just 2 days later, Trump indicates that the current deal is not enough and that South Korea will continue to pay more to the U.S. But as we just heard in that report, South Korea's Blue House has responded by saying the current deal has the option to be extended for another year, and that he hopes the U.S. does not treat it as a, quote, established fact that South Korea will continue to pay more for the U.S. troops. What do you make of that response? I mean, it seems unrealistic that South Korea could expect this current deal just to be extended another year.
Yes, you said that's right, that Blue House hopes that this year deal might be extended to a 2-year deal, but I'm not sure if this would be the fact for the United States. As I have said, that they want to gather different standards that have been applied to every different ally and make a unilateral deal, which would be much more beneficial to the United States than to allies. For example, Japan and Korea have different standards and different rules. For example, South Korea and the United States negotiate and determine the amount of defense cost sharing by the entire amount of money. But in case of Japan, U.S. deal, they decided by agenda. So, I mean, which side is better for the ally? I'm not sure, but I think the U.S. would try to find out some of the ways that they can have more, easy way to negotiate with ally and apply that to every ally unilaterally.
For South Korea, I mean, this is an 8% rise, but then they're going to have to go into negotiations again if there's another rise of a similar amount. That could really be hurt South Korea, especially if they want this continue negotiating deal every year, would it not?
I think so. That would be a really tough deal for South Korea.
I mean, this is an ongoing situation. For example, South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-ha will be meeting with her U.S. counterpart, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, in Warsaw, in Poland, where an international security meeting is taking place. Now, the main agenda for the talks is North Korea, the U.S. summit that's set to take place at the end of the month in Vietnam. But with this remaining difference between the US and South Korea on this cost-sharing burden issue, do you think they will talk about this now, or do you think they will leave that for another time?
I don't think they will talk about that issue right now. The focus that they have to pay is now the US-North Korea deal in Vietnam. They have to think about some possible deals. We only have about less than 2 weeks until the summit meeting, and as Mr. Biegun said, that they are now about to narrow the gaps. I mean, 1 week's left, and they are now finally trying to narrow the gaps. So, if this is true, I mean, it is really not easy to expect some kinds of detailed agreement in the summit meeting. So I think the Pompeo and Kang Kyung-ha, the two foreign ministers, what they have to talk about now is how they can come up with some kinds of deals, substantial big deal in the summit meeting. I don't think it's now time for them to talk about the cost-sharing issues. It's already past the issue.
Then what do you think Kang Kyung-ha will be telling Mike Pompeo during these talks? Because obviously this is the summit is between North Korea and the US. What will South Korea wanting to be telling the US here in this position?
I think something that Mr. Biegun mentioned is that there should be some kinds of flexibility. Right after he got back to the United States, he nuanced that kind of things. I mean, the original stance of the United States is that until there is some substantial nuclear, denuclearization efforts by North Korea, there will be no lifting of sanctions by the United States. But, I think there should be some flexibility from the United States, even though the first measure would not be given by the United States, and even though something that should move first should be North Korea, still there should be some kinds of corresponding measures ready by the United States, not waiting until full negotiation, but partial denuclearization should be, I think, rewarded by the United States in some sense.
Tying this back in with the US forces in Korea, there was an interesting comment made by one of President Trump's military officials. The commander of the U.S. forces in Korea, General Robert Abrams, he issued a statement to the Senate committee this week where he was asked about the need for U.S. forces in South Korea. He said they are needed until there is a peace treaty or some sort of at least an end of war declaration, at least, to make sure the region is secure. That implies once a peace treaty comes in, though, that the US military would pull out of South Korea, which would raise a whole host of geopolitical and security issues in the region. Now, South Korea's defense ministry has responded, saying that the presence of US troops in Korea has nothing to do with a possible end of war agreement or a peace treaty. I mean, why do you think then the general said this? do you think it was just a mistake, or is this some sort of a bigger position that the US really could be considering pulling out of South Korea at some point?
Well, I think from the South Korean experts, they seem to react too much on what the U.S. experts, U.S. officials are saying. What General Abrams said was that there will be no issues of U.S. forces in Korea until peace treaty is talked and discussed. But that doesn't mean that after peace treaty, the U.S. forces in Korea will be withdrawn. I mean, he didn't say that. I mean, we are interpreting things too much, overtly, too much. And there was a response by the United States Defense Ministry, and said that there would be no discussions, no plans to withdraw the U.S. forces in Korea even after the peace treaty is dealt out. And even in this New Year's speech by Kim Jong-un, he didn't say about that. He said about the possible withdrawal of, strategic assets from South Korean territory, stopping the joint military exercises, but he didn't say about the, U.S. forces in Korea going back to the United States. Maybe there will be the Chinese view, but not North Korea's view that has not been talked about that yet. So I think we have to, and President Moon Jae-in also said that the U.S.-South Korea joint, military issues and military alliance issues and U.S. forces in Korea issues, that's something that U.S. and South Korea has determined, not by the peace treaty, not by the denuclearization processes or anything else. So I think we have to make sure that this is something that many leaders, U.S. and South Korean leaders have mentioned, and even Kim Jong-un did not mention that at all. Of course, one important factor that makes us feel insecure is a Trump factor. Trump, he's an unpredictable person. So that's why I think people are nervous about what U.S. positions in the future. But so far, I think, this issue, U.S. forces in Korea going back to the United States, that issue, I don't think is something that I don't think that has been discussed yet.
Why is it so important to have U.S. forces in South Korea? If you can explain to our viewers, just in general, because obviously, these negotiations are ongoing. Trump wants to pull out, but all his officials seem to be saying that they need to stay there. What is it about this, the U.S. troops that both South Korea and the U.S. need?
First, U.S. wants to have its hegemonic stability and leadership in Asian region. That's first one. And second one, by having U.S. versus Korea, the stability in the Korean Peninsula can be, sustained. I mean, whenever there comes up to the risk of war in the Korean Peninsula or some kinds of military provocations, U.S. versus Korea can be the factor that can guarantee the stability here. And also, the regional stability. I mean, we are afraid of, rise of China. We are concerned about that, and North Korea is concerned about that, and many countries in this region are concerned about the rise of China. And U.S. versus Korea can be really an important factor that makes this area very stable about the possible rise of China in this region.
We're out of time now, so that's where we're going to wrap things up. Thank you for coming in today and sharing us your thoughts.
Thank you very much.